Welcome to Happy Naked, the podcast. This is your host, Dee, and I'm the founder of D Health and Fitness, creator of NakedFit online program, and author of Happy Naked, a straightforward 5 sense guide to loving the skin you're in and feeling the energy in every area of your life. I have helped hundreds of people over the last few years through fitness, nutrition, daily habits, and healing. So please book your appointment with me. So go to www.nakedfit.online/home. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you to see how I can be of service of you. So follow me on Instagram as dmago_happy naked on Instagram, as well as Facebook, and also on Facebook under Naked Fit 100% Health and Fitness. Remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. When an episode is interesting to you, please share with your friends and family. And if you find another episode being of interest to any of your friends and family, just please share with them. And also remember to check the notifications so then you know when I'm uploading a new episode for you. So, and in the most recent years, I discovered that one of my missions in life is to bring to light taboo topics and the naked truth through raw stories and conversations that will help you to have better health, relationships, and intimate relationships, as well as help humanity to elevate the vibration of our Mother Earth, which we all need right now more than ever. Fear is a very low vibration. That's what's happened. We need to elevate that. So you remember back when you were a teenager, when your parents were teaching you to be responsible citizens with integrity and honesty, how things have changed since then, right? So we are living in a society where instant gratification is obvious, where most citizens in many countries feel entitled to who knows what on a daily basis. And I see how taking responsibility and owning your shit is not part of the day-to-day for many. We're living in a society where respect is only under your own terms, where corruption is everywhere. When I thought I have seen it all when I was in Venezuela, then now I get to see it everywhere, especially since March 2020, with the so-called virus that now have changed to a disease. We're living in a world where people request in a restaurant what exact ingredients are in the dish because it's so important for their allergies and sensitivities than asking a doctor and a nurse what are the ingredients in the vaccines or even medication that you have been prescribed. And remember, we all have gotten vaccines at some point, and we all have done it to our children at some point as well. And I never asked that to the doctors or nurses, actually. I didn't even know any better. So we're living in a world where everyone rather be told in every subtle way what to do than actually take responsibility. Hold yourself accountable and hold accountable our so-called leaders in the government as well. We're living in a world where censorship is a day-to-day thing, where we all know the politicians are the most corrupted beings in the world, where we know that the news channels are always biased to the highest bidder. And same things with the newspaper. And suddenly, people made the decision to believe what politicians and the news are saying. When respected doctors and nurses and even honest journalists have been blocked, banned, and even their life has been put at risk for speaking the truth based on facts and science. This is how twisted the world is. When I thought I have seen it all started from corruption and crime in Venezuela. Actually, I see it now everywhere in the world. My heart is hurt, and it's sad to see how many people are blind and unable to do the proper research through the proper channels, not Facebook or stream media. We're living in a society where it is better to be connected to a phone and computer than your own family members. We're living in a world where it is better to believe what Facebook considers to be true than actually do your own research to make your own mind about things. We're living in a world where it is better to do what you're told because you are afraid to take a fine from the police than defending your own freedom and truth, all because you're not willing to take responsibility for yourself, your future, and the future of your kids. It is better to follow the rules than fight for injustice. It is better to be submissive than stand up for your rights and freedoms. It is better to stay home isolated than go out and challenge the system. So my special guest today, it is anonymous, so I'm keeping him secret. And it is a police officer with 17 years of experience. He has been in the front line policing, I think that's the right way to say it, where the charter issues are central to every case in every interaction. So welcome to my guest today. And first and most, I want to say thank you because he is here to share all his thoughts. And I'm so excited because he says yes to this. And of course, I'm looking on this direction because he's right here. And so I will be looking at him, not necessarily at the camera. So I hope you enjoy it. I also have this, I have this on Facebook as well. So just please put your comments and questions and we'll get back to that at some point. But welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
So what are you, tell me what are your thoughts about everything that I shared in the introduction?
You shared a lot in the introduction. I don't know where to start. Should we start about talking about policing or COVID or rights versus responsibilities or?
This is all your choice. You can start whatever your heart is telling you to start.
Okay. Let's first start with one thing that stuck out to me that I liked what you said early on about raising the vibration of the world and how fear is a very low vibration. Let's talk about fear first and foremost. There's a lot of it going on today on all sides. And people are fear mongering and there's all kinds of sides opposing one another and saying we're right, you're wrong, and other sides saying the same thing about the others. Just, I guess, by way of introduction and validating myself as your guest, I have been a cop for 17 years. And I've done several Zoom calls with information like this, mostly for extended family and friends. Mm-hmm. People who live in Canada as well as other countries who are wondering about police enforcement and how they can, my opinion, not only on just COVID and what's going on in the world today, but even like earlier in the spring about BLM and everything else.
Yeah.
They want to know my perspective, the perspective from somebody who's in the trenches of law enforcement. So, in 17 years, I've arrested a lot of people for a lot of different things. Let's just say, let's put it generally out there. Let's just say, on average, I've arrested one person per week for my time on the job. Mm-hmm. There's lots of times, there's several days where I've arrested multiple people in one day. There's some times where I didn't really arrest anybody any day, or I went a week or two between arresting people, depending on where I was working. On average, let's just say, and I'd suggest that this is a conservative estimate, I've arrested one person per week. So you can do the math, mm-hmm. One a week, 52 weeks a year, over 17 years, that's hundreds and hundreds of arrests, mm-hmm. Okay? I've put hands on people,
and this is just in one city.
Hundreds of times just in this city, yeah, mm-hmm. And that's just me. Yeah. That's not counting everybody else. And a lot of those people are the same person, they're repeat offenders, mm-hmm. or whatever, but I've charged a lot of people with a lot of crimes. I've been to court for a lot of different cases. I'll tell you first and foremost that central to every single thing that I do, central to every case that I'm involved in, and every decision that I make is the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, not only in my oath in the Alberta Police, but in police departments across the country, the number one thing that a police officer swears in Canada is to uphold the charter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a lot of things that are in the charter, and you can read it. It's online. It's available. Yeah. You can read and see what's on there, including the right to assembly,
Yeah.
The freedom of assembly, freedom against search without grounds or without a warrant.
Do you guys study all that stuff? Actually?
Oh yeah, we study it, and we don't just study it because yes, we study it in recruit class, but it doesn't really hit home to a police officer until it's actually been put into practice. So for example, you can teach me what the charter says, but it's not until I actually go arrest somebody and I had to read them their charter rights, and then I take them to jail and I go to court, and then it turns out, oh, guess what? Like I forgot to maybe tell them what they were under arrest for, or maybe I forgot to, maybe they said something that I tried to have admitted into court, but I forgot to read them the caution, things like this. So we study it, yes, but more importantly, on the front lines and while you're policing, very often you actually learn it, and it becomes part of you, everything you do, and it affects what you do. So for example, let's say I want to arrest somebody for any kind of offense. I have to have reasonable grounds that they've committed that offense. I have to have reasonable grounds that there's a crime being committed. If I go and arrest somebody,
my brain is going right now. So keep talking.
If I go and arrest somebody, just because I kind of think, well, you know what, that guy's that person looks like a bad guy. That person looks like a drug dealer. They're behaving in a way that's kind of consistent with drug dealing. If I can't explain why my suspicion is reasonable, and if I can't explain that in court, and I can't create a nexus, okay, between what I observed and what ultimately leads to the arrest, that's a charter breach. Let's take it to something that's happening these days. We hear stories about people getting tickets in their homes for gathering, for having friends over at Christmas time.
And even for the rallies, the freedom rallies.
Yeah, those things. Okay.
And even one of the leaders got in prison last week, actually for Boxing Day. Yeah. He got arrested after the rally when he was by himself. Like after the rally was finished, he got arrested.
So in order to convict somebody of a crime, you have to have what's called actus reus and mens reus, which is the illegal act, the criminal act, as well as the criminal mind. You have to have the identity of the person. You have to have evidence of the crime. Okay. Let's say you have some people over. What are police going to need in order to charge somebody for violating the Public Health Act? They're going to need a suspicion that a crime is being committed, that a violation is being committed. They're going to need the identity of the person. But here's the thing. In charging somebody with a violation of the Public Health Act by way of visiting a house that doesn't belong to them, part of the element of the offense is that person's identity. How that differs from some other crime is that the identity is just part of what the police officer needs to pursue prosecution. So let me explain it this way. let's say I see somebody crossing, jaywalking, okay? Very minor thing, somebody's jaywalking, and I decide, you know what, I've seen it, that's happened, that's an offense, it's a bylaw offense. I now, as a police officer, am lawfully placed to stop that person and obtain their identity, okay? And detain that person for the purpose of, I guess, prosecuting them for jaywalking. Okay, it's a minor offense, but the law allows me. Okay, and there are common law duties as well as what have been established as common law powers, I guess, of police. One of those things, one of the things that has been upheld through hundreds of years of policing and through case law, it's been established that police are allowed to do what is necessary in order to obtain somebody's identity for the purpose of prosecuting them for an offense. It doesn't matter how big or small that offense is. So if somebody is jaywalked, I'm now lawfully placed to stop that person and obtain their identity so I can give them a jaywalking ticket. Okay. Jaywalking is not what we call an indictable offense. It's not something that I can just arrest somebody for and take them to jail for. Okay, it's a bylaw offense. Nobody's going to jail for jaywalking. However, let's say I stop somebody for jaywalking. If they refuse to share their information with me, if they refuse to identify themselves, then my common law duties as a police officer to identify that person and my police powers that have been established through, again, like hundreds of years in the courts of policing, my police power allows me to now arrest that person for failing to identify themselves according to the law for, jaywalking. So now, even though it's just a small thing, jaywalking, because that person is refusing to identify themselves, they're obstructing justice. That's a criminal offense. I can now arrest that person. I can take that person down to jail. I can fingerprint them. I can photograph them. And then I can carry out whatever measure I need in order to identify that person. Identifying the person, though, in a jaywalking case is not part of the offense. It's not part of the, it's not one of the elements of the offense. I don't have to establish that person's identity in order to establish grounds that an offense has been committed. Okay, it's just something after the fact. I go and I take them to jail and I obtain their identity. In the case of being in somebody's home, however, your identity is part of the offense. Meaning, if the police come here and say, "Do you live here? Who are you?" Now, by identifying yourself, you can also incriminate yourself. So by saying I'm so-and-so and I don't live here, now all of a sudden I'm incriminating myself and I'm giving the police evidence that indeed an offense has been committed. Okay, so there's a tricky part.
There's a trick always. There's always a trick.
That's the tricky part. The police, your charter right is freedom from search without grounds or without a warrant. In asking you to identify yourself, if your identity forms part of the offense, then that constitutes a search on the part of the police. That means that by divulging your identity to somebody when you're visiting someone else's house, you also incriminate yourself. That constitutes a search by the police. They can come to your door. They can come knock on your door and ask who's who, but you don't have to identify yourself. You don't have to, because until they know that you live there or don't, they don't have reasonable grounds to suspect that you live there.
But how do you respond to that?
Number one, you don't answer your door. If it's so important, if it's so urgent, and it's so such a pressing crime that needs to be dealt with,
There will be a warrant or
That's
something,
just
right?
it. That's
If
just
it's
it.
an actual,
Yeah, a judge will grant a
like,
warrant. We call it a Feeney warrant when it's urgent and we need to get into a house to apprehend somebody, or if we think somebody's hiding out inside. But here's the thing: if an officer fills out, let's just say applies for a warrant, and the judge is like, okay, well, who do you want to go in there and get? Well, they'll have to say, well, we don't know who they are.
mm-hmm.
The judge will say, well, how do you know that they're in violation of this act? The warrant will never get issued. I haven't heard of such a thing. I've never heard of a warrant being issued for somebody violating the Public Health Act.
Yeah.
Now, so you're going to have to refuse to answer your door.
Yeah.
Or have a screen door so that they can't open that. And you can kind of talk to them through the screen door and just say, I'm not talking to you. What's going on? Is this urgent? Are you notifying me of the death of a loved one or something?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Am I under arrest? No? Okay, go away, get off my steps.
Yeah.
We've seen videos, and I've just watched one today of
I have seen
of people being pulled out of their homes by the police. Now,
in Calgary?
No,
okay.
I haven't seen any in Calgary,
I have seen it
but
mostly in the States, right?
Yeah, well, there's one in Quebec.
Yeah,
there's others in Canada, but I'm suspicious of those videos because nowhere in there does it actually say, and neither does the police say this is because you're in this home and you're violating the public health order. Yeah. I highly suspect, especially in cases where the police have like physically dragged people out of these homes, I highly suspect, and I would suggest that it's much more likely that those people are actually criminals, that they actually are warrants for those people, that maybe they're, they've done some other crime and then the police are coming to get them. And now it's being posted and people are saying, oh, this is the COVID police. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'd be surprised if it is. Yeah. Well,
it's like everything, right? We need to do the research because it was posted and it's out there. It doesn't mean that it's true for what the title is.
Yeah.
It's just, it can be anything these days.
Yeah. I've also heard a lot of people saying, my friend they each got $1,000 ticket in their home, or my neighbors, they got $5,000 tickets or whatever. I say, show me, have them post a picture. Show me a picture of the fine that they got. Show me a picture of the summons.
I personally know people that they got fined at their homes for being at the freedom rallies.
Yeah. Okay.
But they have, like, I know quite, like, personally, I know few, and then from there I also know other people that were connected to, but personally I already know some that have been, they got the police showing up at their house, giving them the fine because they show up in one of the rallies, right?
Yeah.
So.
And that's another issue. We'll get to that in a minute, but.
And another guy, and I also know him personally, he got handcuffed right after the rally. This is a different one. It's not the same one as the one that got arrested. He got handcuffed while they were putting the fine to him. Yeah. And then there were two police officers and he was handcuffed.
Yeah. And here's the thing too, because there's a couple different, I'll tell you right now also, in policing, you have every variety of person, just like you have in every other job. You have some people who are cool and calm and reasonable. You have some people who just hate everything. You have people who are lazy. You have people who are gung-ho and excited and very energetic. You have people who are just nerds who want to do like administrative work. You have people who just don't want to do that at all, who hate writing reports. You have every kind of person. I know that there is some enforcement going on as a result of the rallies. Quite honestly, me personally, I don't understand how that can possibly be happening, because again, I've been to court, I've been involved in cases. I know what it takes to have something thrown out of court. I know what it takes to have a prosecutor refuse to even run the trial. because a charter issue has been raised.
Mm.
I've been in court. I've had cases dropped right in the middle of a trial because a charter issue has been raised. I've attended court and been sent home because a charter issue was raised. I've been called the day before and said, hey, don't come to court tomorrow because we're not going to run this trial because a charter issue was raised. There's all kinds of charter issues. And as far as the rally goes, for me, we have the right to assemble. We have the right to assemble, and no public health act anywhere has the ability to overrule any charter right. These charter rights are so precious to Canadians that police get in trouble all the time for violating them. Not necessarily on purpose, but just by not being aware, not realizing that they're breaching somebody's charter rights.
Well, but here's the thing, and I think you and I have this conversation in different ways in the past. We know that corruption is everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in the police department, I'm sure, even if it might not be obvious, as it was obvious to me when I was in Venezuela, that it was pretty obvious. It might not be that obvious to us in this country, and but I'm sure there's corruption, right? Like totally. So, and that's what I'm in some levels I'm afraid of, because corruption, it's something that is really, really tough to fight. Even more when it gets at that level where police officers in Canada, where we think they're very respectful individuals because they're actually honest and they have a level of integrity, right? And my fear it is that corruption is taking over, like at more like deeper than what we were able to see before, right? So I don't know.
There's various motives for corruption. It could be financial, but it could be also all kinds of things, political, all kinds of for power, for advancement in different offices or whatever. Absolutely, corruption is an issue, and the police department is not immune from corruption at all in any way other than different from any other organization. I've been lucky to see very little of it on my job, in my career, among my peers. Now, that's not to say that there are people in other spheres in my department with whom I don't generally associate that aren't corrupt in various
we normally
manners.
attract the people that we share the same core values with. So
That's
that kind of let's go with that. Right?
But let me say this. Canadians, or at least people here, and I think a lot of people in a lot of places in North America, have been pretty lucky to not have to be terribly worried about upfront street level corruption. Okay. We don't have to worry about being pulled over just to be extorted for money in Canada. Because of that, and because of a lot of the very healthy and generous conditions under which Canadians live, quite generally speaking, because of that, Canadians as a whole are very reluctant to acknowledge evil. Okay.
High five for that, because I'm happy that you're saying that.
Canadians are very reluctant to acknowledge the existence of evil, and evil in various forms. People are, quite frankly, and I've had this conversation with people that I've arrested and their families and whatever else. I said, you know what? There's such thing as good in this world and evil.
And in every area.
Yeah.
In every area. It's not that like all I generalize when I'm saying that politicians are corrupted because it's a very
Mhm.
generic statement.
Mhm.
I'm sure there are politicians that are truly honest, but we don't
Sure.
get to see them because corruption takes over that,
Yeah.
right?
So
So
and people, it's uncomfortable. People don't want to feel like they actually have something that they need to be uh, vigilant against.
yes,
People don't want to acknowledge that there's a possibility that they could get carjacked or that they could get robbed in their office or in their home. They don't want to acknowledge the possibility that they might have to experience or encounter something that's very adverse in their lives or like related to the criminal justice system.
Well, and I always say that like as a another general statement is that Canadians are very naive.
Yes.
For everything that you're saying, right?
So when the issue comes up that, hey, guess what? There is conspiracy or there is corruption. People not only deny it, but they then villainize whoever tries to sound the alarm against it. And I'll tell you right now, I'll give you an example. I've been involved and I've seen several contracts being prepared for the department. I've seen people working on these contracts for various equipment or various services that the department needs. I've seen with my own eyes in multiple cases for services that we're going to provide or not provide, equipment that we need or services that we're going to use. Decisions being made that are neither for the best interest of the department nor for the best interest of the citizens that it serves.
So I understand that the police also do an oath on the benefit of the citizens, something like that? Like doctors do a certain oath for, you don't harm or do no harm or something like that. Is there anything like that for the police in Canada?
Is. I can't remember. It's in the oath.
But it's part of it.
Okay. And it's different from province to province.
Oh, really?
But they're all going to have the same elements.
Oh, okay.
But and people forget that though. People forget that, and officers forget that, and they forget that, and there's some leniency there too. I can say for sure that in my career, what I used to define as the line between black and white has definitely widened, and it's a big, fat, wide gray line. Okay, for what's right and what's wrong and what's okay and what's not. What's legal and what's not legal are very clear, but what's right and what's wrong are completely different things. And where that line is really varies case by case by case. And the longer you're in policing, the wider that line gets. The more crap you see, and the more issues you observe, and the more situations you're in that you realize, you know what, well, maybe it's not so black and white. Maybe the solution here is not so clear cut.
Totally.
But whether somebody loses sight of that or not is not justification for corruption or conspiring. And here's the thing too. So we talked about people getting villainizing people who allege conspiracy or allege corruption.
A lot of that is not conspiracy anymore.
Well, that's just it. Conspiracy theory has become a bad word. And conspiracy theorists have become labeled as crazy people who believe things that aren't real and believe in all kinds of crazy things. Well, the thing is, to call somebody a conspiracy theorist or to use that label at all is to deny the possibility that there is evil to the extent within humanity that somebody might conspire for one reason or another. Well, here's the thing. In the criminal code, there is murder, there is conspiracy to commit murder. You can be charged for conspiring to do crimes. Even if you don't do the crimes, you can be charged for conspiring to do them. And people conspire. That's what we call it. It's just the word that we use. People who plan things, people who do things behind closed doors, and they try to work out secret ways of making them happen. That is conspiracy. And I've seen it. I've seen it in the department. I've seen it in our city. And I know for a fact that human beings conspire. Not always for evil, sometimes for good, but beings and forces do conspire. So in order to call somebody a conspiracy theorist or to use that label is to dismiss the idea that conspiracy does not exist.
And
it's to choose ignorance, quite honestly.
And you know, there is something and I think I shared that with you in this documentary I was watching where they talk about brainwashing and all that stuff. And but where they go back and where the conspiracy theory became banned, or like, you know what, it is all lies, is, you know, all that kind of stuff. And everything started back with the CIA, where they actually started saying that that's not true, it's a conspiracy, it is all conspiracy theory. And they're the ones that actually put on the dark side that those two words. I didn't know that, because I mean, obviously there are a lot of things that I'm just learning now as an adult, and also in the recent months, because I can only make a decision and I can only make up my own mind and have an opinion by getting to know different things and different perspectives, and also get to know the facts, right? And it's interesting to see how many things has been planted by the CIA, and of course from there it's spread out all over the world, right? Like it's just, it
well,
is
and
what
people
it
have
is.
this idea that conspiracy theories are, you know, spawned by these crazy people who live in their basement and they have pictures of things all over the place with little red, you know, strings connecting them. Things that because they're crazy, they see connections but aren't actually connected. That's not true. It's stuff that we as human beings have the ability to recognize as distinct and different from our baseline. We all see and we operate throughout our lives among baselines that are normal to us. And when we see things that are abnormal or stand out from those baselines, we don't know how to explain those. We wonder, well, why is that different? Sometimes there's a perfectly good explanation. Sometimes there's not. And when there's not, especially if there is something to be gained as a result of the scenario, and that scenario is impossible to explain by legitimate means, then yes, it's easy to deduce that there is a conspiracy, that somebody is conspiring in this case.
And you know, even in that concept, what I find is there are a lot of things that we're not exposed to. Because, you know, because it's not the kind of world or environment that we hang out, you know, or the people that we hang out with, right? So that there are a lot of things, even to me, I have seen terrible things, not necessarily when I was in Venezuela, but now as a result of all the things that are coming out. And that I look at it up to a point, and then I chose to stop, because I'm like, this is so disturbing and disgusting that it's going to affect my sleep, right? It's going to affect my sanity. So I know it exists. I know it's out there. It's not the people I hang out with that do this, or at least that I think, right, they don't do this kind of horrible things. And but because I'm not like directly exposed to that, it doesn't mean that doesn't exist.
That's just it. There's a lot of things that people are not aware of, that because they're not aware of them, they can't acknowledge those things as possibilities for what they've seen. I'll give you an example. Years ago, My partner and I arrested two people. We arrested dozens of people. Yeah, we arrested two people involved in a drug transaction. My partner arrested the person who had just bought the drugs, and I arrested the person who was selling them. And we could see this, this transaction happening immediately across the street from us. We saw it with our own eyes. And as we approached these people, they split. And this is kind of rush hour time downtown. We split, and my guy went one way, the other guy went the other way. And so I chased the dealer through a crowd of people. He looked old, he looked frail, he looked helpless. So somebody who hasn't experienced the drug world, who is not aware of drugs, who's not aware of crack or how that world works or how it affects people, would look and see that's a frail old man being chased down by the cops for no reason. Why would they do that to an old man? Okay, so I grabbed this guy and I took him to the ground because he was struggling to get away from me, and I took him down. And when I arrested him, he had his hands underneath him. Okay, my experience is different from everyone else around me. There's hundreds of people at the bus stop watching this. That's okay. If they have never dealt with somebody who's got a knife or another weapon on them, or who is concealing or trying to get rid of evidence, such as a handful of crack, okay, then they're not aware of why in the world a cop who's my size and my age would possibly be on top of somebody acting violently, and yes, acting violently, but justifiably so, with an old looking person on the ground. Okay. But the person was rolling around on his hands. Yeah. It took some effort for me to pry his hands out from under him and then get him into handcuffs and then stand him up, because I've had people throw their crack into their mouth and swallow it when I'm arresting them. I've had them chew it. I've had them throw it away. I've had them toss it down the hall of the mall where I've arrested them. I've had all these things happen. It was important for me to preserve the evidence and prevent that person from destroying it or obscuring it or getting rid of it somehow. Okay, so I managed to get this person under arrest. I managed to get the drugs out of his hands. Managed to get him to jail. And sure enough, later that day or the next day, I get a call, and I had been accused of police brutality. Because it looked ugly, and here's the thing, it always looks ugly, and I wish it didn't, but it does. It just always does. It always does, and that's just no two. It doesn't look cool like on TV or on a movie. It's not choreographed. It always is ugly. But I had been accused, and it was a third party. It was a woman who was standing at the bus stop who watched this, and she was horrified at the way that I handled this guy and how rough I was with this seemingly old man. Well, here's the thing. So, and I don't blame her, because she doesn't know what drugs do to people. She doesn't know how drug dealers behave. She doesn't know the violent means to which any drug dealer will resort in order to preserve their drugs and cash. Because make no mistake, we took his drugs away as well as the proceeds of crime. So her awareness didn't allow for any other explanation to that event other than this cop is enraged and he's going too far. Well, once she realized that, okay, this guy was a drug dealer, he was selling a whole bunch of crack, he had a bunch of crack in his hands, he was trying not to get it taken away from him. So even though I caught him, he was still struggling and holding his hands underneath him on the ground and not allowing me to. He was not submitting to arrest. Yes, of course. Okay. So, and here's the other thing. Guess what? He looked frail, and he was very skinny, and he looked old. He was like 45. Yeah. He was the same age I am now. Okay. He looked old, and I've dealt with people. There was a lady when I was downtown. I was horrified how old she looked. She looked like she was 75. No, it is terrible. But she was 36. She was literally 36, and I had a video of her telling me that she was 36 years old. Wow. So so there's an explanation. Now, in a case where there's no reasonable explanation, of course, maybe a conspiracy would be warranted. But In that case, there was a reasonable
But
explanation.
here's the other thing. Going back to the conspiracy and all that kind of stuff, I think what I can what I sometimes think is people are not willing to take the responsibility to do their own research.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is, they don't want to be seen as this conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not, it's not going to make you look good. It's not going to be like you, at some point, you will have to defend your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that it's most likely based on facts when it is, right?
Yeah.
But you still have to defend your point of view and whatever you're sharing to people based on facts, right? And people, so there are two things to that. Nobody wants to take responsibility to do their own research. They just do what they're told. And then on the other hand, they are afraid of confrontation, which is, good example is what you just told about going after the drug dealer. It's a confrontation.
Yeah.
You don't want to have that. But you know what? It is what the heck are you going to do, right? You want to stop what is happening, because if you don't stop that individual, right,
Mm-hmm.
things are gonna get
Mm-hmm.
worse, because we already know drugs can get to kids, it can get to abuse, it can get to trafficking, the list goes on and on what happens in the drug dealing world, right? Which is stuff that we know and stuff that I sometimes don't want to know, right?
Yeah.
And but those are the things that it is. So we have to avoid. So would you avoid confrontation just because it looks ugly? Like in my head, I would say no, because I come from a place where nobody is afraid of confrontation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it is fine to have an argument.
Mm-hmm.
We, like, even among my family, we can have an argument, we yell at each other, and then that's it. End of the story. Everybody share their own point of view, but I don't see that here. Everybody's avoiding responsibilities in any way possible and confrontation. Right?
Yeah,
so
that's exactly it. And confrontation, to be clear, on a social level, affects our actual innate drive to survive. So that's why in Canadians, because we're so accustomed to just being polite or whatever, instead of confronting people when we think we should have, or we regret not confronting them afterwards, it's because that confrontation initiates our threat response, okay, our survival response in us. It elevates our heart rate. It elevates our adrenaline.
Everything, yeah.
Everything. It puts us into that survival response. Whether it should or shouldn't, I don't know, but it does. And Canadians are not used to it, and we're very terrified of doing that kind of thing. Yeah. They don't want to do confrontation. They don't want to stand out from the crowd. And socially, for digging into your own information, that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, because really we are driven to conform, not just as a society, but as a species. We're driven to conform. And most people aren't even aware that they should question the messaging that they're receiving. They're not even aware that there is an alternative, that there's anything worth questioning at all, let alone people who actually want to question that. I'll give you another example. Not too long ago, I saw a headline. I think it was on the Sun. The headline said, 300 new cases. Okay. But let's explain that. Let's talk about that. Yeah. 300 new cases. Does that mean there are 300 more sick people? Does that mean there are 300 more people in the hospital? Or does that just mean there's 300 more positive test results among people who may or may not, recognize any effects whatsoever? What is it? Either way, the headline is big and it's scary, and it says 300 new cases. Yeah. So people are driven to conform with that stuff. And what it all comes down to, and again, we mentioned this earlier, is fear. Yeah. Which is why I haven't watched mainstream media, mainstream news since 2008. Okay, 12 years. This is long before anybody talked about conspiracy theories. This is long before anybody questioned the government. Even 9/11 was still kind of like, people who questioned 9/11 were still kind of on the outskirts going like, oh, they're crazy or what. 2008. And that's because my own experience as a police officer. By then, I'd already been on the job for 4 years. By then, and again, if you're a good cop and you're out there and you've been involved in all kinds of cases, you've been on the news. You literally, I've been on the news. I don't even know how many times. I don't know how many times I've been interviewed by the mainstream media, and speaking to these reporters and seeing the news and giving them the sound bites and trying to give them information that I think is relevant, and then seeing it come out on the news and the angle that they put on it, I realized right fast. The news is not in the business of providing information. No. The news is in the business of, number one, selling more news.
Yes, marketing
number two,
and sales.
In order to sell more news, driving fear.
Yep.
And I have this conversation with a lot of people, and people are like, well, I think it's important to consult all kinds of different outlets, because there's clearly some right-wing media, there's clearly some left-wing media, and even independent media. I'll tell you right now, yes, they're all sharing information, but they're all doing it in a way that's similar to one another, and that is fear. They're not out there to inform you. They're not out there to give you options and to help you think for yourself and make decisions for yourself. The messaging is the same, or rather, even if the messaging is different, the product is the same. And that product is fear. The product they're delivering to you is fear. In fact, I spoke to one of the reporters. I questioned him about it one time after I was done one news release. And I asked him, he said, actually, you know what? He told me, he said, the CBC here hired consultants. And he said, they hired consultants and they did like a 3-month-long study, and they came up with a business plan for the CBC to help them sell more news, sell more viewership on TV and more listenership on the radio and more whatever articles and everything. The entire strategy. He said, number one, they came back to CBC and said, number one, did I tell you this once already? No. Number one, your core market is females between the ages of 25 and 55. That's your number one market. He said, number two, your number one product to those females is fear. It's not the news, but it's fear. And it's so that because females are generally less risk averse. They're generally more nesting, more protective, more they're more concerned about just keeping what they've got. And he said, your product is fear, and you have to deliver your news in a way that makes your viewers just scared enough to tune in again tomorrow.
Yes. And it's so like and it's something that and I'm sure this when it comes to marketing and sales, right? And I have taken courses and all that stuff. It's all about fear. Like when I have been taught to do my own marketing for my own business, it's always, what is the biggest fear? So it's going to help people to take action and get on your programs because they want to solve that. It's not only about the issue that you want to solve, but also you want to plant that fear that if you don't, let's say, I'm just going to give an example. If you don't lose weight, you can have a heart attack.
That's right.
Something like that, right? Which obviously, most people know this, right? If you don't take care of yourself, right? There's a chance that, there's going to develop a cardiovascular condition at some point. So, but it's all based on fear, right? And there's people telling me, I'm not afraid, I just wear a mask. I'm like, but you're wearing a mask based on what? Right? Even though that the person doesn't feel that it's afraid of something that they cannot see, they cannot smell, they don't even know if they exist because there's no proof yet, right, about it. And But people are still wearing a mask
Yeah.
for two reasons. They're afraid of something that they don't know, and they're afraid of confrontation.
Yeah.
It's fear either
It's
way.
funny they mentioned that. So there's an excellent book. It's called On Killing. There's David Grossman. He's an excellent. He's a world-renowned author and speaker. He's got a couple of books. One is called On Killing. The other one is called On Combat. And in there, he's done a lot of research about the factors that enable soldiers to kill, that enable things that enable people in war and in peace times in society to kill. He talks about the universal phobia. He's like, you know what? Jerry Seinfeld gets up and he says, like, the number one phobia is the fear of public speaking. He's like, more people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. That's what Jerry Seinfeld says, right?
Yeah.
And he's close.
Yep.
But Dave Grossman talks about the universal phobia, which he says is human aggression. The universal phobia is human aggression. So whether it's a fear of public speaking, that's because somebody innately fears even the subconscious aggression that they may be feeling from an audience as they speak. You talk about somebody not wearing a mask. Well, they don't want to upset people. They don't want to, they want to be polite or whatever. Why? Because they fear aggression. They fear being confronted by people who think they should be wearing a mask. Yes, they might also fear the disease or whatever else.
Yeah, there's so many other things. Yeah.
I tell people are like, well, I have a compromised immune system. Oh, well, I'm kind of old. Oh, well, I've had a heart attack. I say, well, why don't you just identify with the phrase, I'm healthy and I have an excellent immune system.
Yeah.
I'm healthy and I have an excellent immune system. I don't fear anything. I don't fear any disease.
Well, and it's funny because I personally have seen people that have like a autoimmune disease, and they're out in the rally not wearing masks. They're showing up every week. They're happy. They're fine. They're healthy because even this one girl that I personally know, she is like all she has to do is just keep herself in a certain level, then she knows that her immune system doesn't get compromised, and she knows what to do by now, right? She's not taking any medication because the prescriptions were going to be worse than the actual condition that she has. And she's like, as long as I keep myself in that and at that level that she already identified, she's fine. So how can I explain that someone like her, right, has been exposed and she also doesn't wear a mask because it makes her sick actually. And so what is all with that? And the other thing is when people like look at me, they're like, oh, you're not wearing a mask. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's mandatory if you comply. Right? I did not consent to this. Nobody asked me if I consent to everything that they have been putting out there. And I said, and I made that clear, I do not consent.
Let's talk about that. I've done a Zoom call previously about the Public Health Act before and public health orders. There's a couple interesting things in there. One is in the Health Act, it literally says that the health minister or whoever is designated by the Health Act to take action relative to the public health of the province has the ability to make any decision, has the ability to enact any measures that they deem necessary to protect the health of the public. So yeah, they're allowed to make these rules. Here's the thing. At the very end of the act, there's a clause that describes paramountcy. Okay, paramountcy is the word that is used to explain kind of like a hierarchy of various acts of legislation. Okay, let me give you an example. If I I've seen this 100 times in my job. I go to a landlord-tenant complaint. There's a disagreement between the landlord and the tenant, and one person has done one thing, or somebody has failed to, live up to the contract or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll read a contract through. Like they'll provide me the contract. On the cops, I've showed up. Maybe the landlord is not letting the tenant back into the house, or who knows what, right? And they're like, well, they haven't done this in the contract. I'm like, okay, so I'll look at the contract. Ultimately, the contract doesn't matter. If there's anything in the contract that is different from what the Residential Tenancies Act of Alberta says. So if the Residential Tenancies Act says you can have this long, or that the landlord's not allowed to change the locks, it doesn't matter if the contract says I'm going to change your locks if you're a day late on the rent, because that is superseded by the Tenancy Act.
Yes.
Okay. Here's the thing. So if we take the Public Health Act of Alberta, the paramountcy literally says in the end, it says this act and any action initiated as a result of this act or under this act by an agent of it or whatever, supersedes any other act in Alberta except the Alberta Bill of Rights. Now, most people probably haven't read the Alberta Bill of Rights, but guess what supersedes even the Criminal Code, even the Canada Shipping Act, or even the Fair Trade Act, or whatever, any other act in Canada? Guess what supersedes every other act in Canada? The Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Okay.
The Charter of Rights and Freedoms supersedes every single thing in Canada. So for that reason, cops like me, people who are out on the street, people who do this stuff, people who think, especially people who are free thinking, as well as criminal prosecutors, provincial prosecutors, if there's a breach of that charter in terms of somebody's right to assemble, or somebody's right to to go somewhere, nothing's going to go through court. That's my feeling. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
So we can say, and again, it really is spreading fear when we're like, oh, so-and-so got this ticket, so-and-so got that ticket. Well, guess what? If they did get a ticket, it's from somebody who hasn't experienced like the down and dirty of law and legal proceedings the way I have, and the way a lot of our criminal and provincial prosecutors have. People who sit in legislation, people who sit in parliament or sit in legislature, they come with these acts. Nenshi and these people who sit in City Hall, they come up with these things and they make these rules. Well, they're not the ones who are battling it out in the courts. They make these rules, and then later on it turns out, well, guess what? It's not worth the paper it's written on. And I've seen this time and again. I've seen it in other cases in the city. So we need to make people aware of what their rights are, and of what the process is for even prosecuting somebody for an alleged violation of the Public Health Act. Because again, even if it's an actual violation of the Public Health Act, if the act or the order that they're violating is contrary to whatever their charter right may be, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to stand up. And this comes to complacency.
Yes. And it's it is. I know the people that most people that goes to those freedom rallies, they're most likely aware of their rights. Like they know what to do, and but on the other side, there is a lot of people that are afraid to show up because of these things that are being posted on. I don't read the news. I don't watch TV
Yeah.
or anything like that.
Mhm.
And but I hear from people, right, what it's being on the newspaper and stuff like that.
Yep.
And based on how my mom behaves, I know she's been watching the news.
Yeah. I'm literally going to get a t-shirt that says, I stopped watching the news before it was cool.
Yeah, I know. And there is a friend of mine. I think you met her before, and she was telling me that like her grandma is in, I think it's Manitoba,
Okay.
right? Not even here. So she talks to her grandma every day. Hey, grandma, how you doing in the morning? She's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm tired because there is lockdown. Like she cannot even buy a crossword, like a book because it's not essential. So she's like going nuts at home. She doesn't, have any way to go out, do nothing. The only thing that she has is TV, right?
Yeah.
So this my friend just go and talks to her at night. Hey, grandma, how you doing? Oh my God, I'm just going out. I'm just afraid. This is thing. And he goes, grandma, we talked about this already. You're safe. Everything is fine. You need to stop watching the news.
Yeah.
She goes, every single day, I know when she's been watching the news.
Yeah.
Because her behavior changes completely.
Yeah.
And even with my mom the other day, she's like, I don't want the police to come here. I don't want to get tickets. I don't want to. I'm like, I know she's been watching the news for what she's telling me. She's like, I know you're against all this stuff. I said, I'm not against this. I am defending my rights, which is different.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and it might sound the same,
Mhm.
right? Even when I explain that to her in Spanish, it's the same thing. It sounds like I'm against something. And I'm like, I'm not against something. I'm just defending my rights. And nobody, and I was telling this to somebody else as well. I was going to the dentist,
Mhm.
and then she's telling me like she is, completely sad because of the new measures. She cannot spend time with her family in Christmas. I didn't say anything, right? I didn't reply. I'm like, I already can tell where she doesn't know, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to have an argument. I want my teeth clean. That's all I want. I don't want to have a deep conversation too early in the morning. She turns around and she's looking at me. She's like, but you don't think the same way. I said, nobody in this planet can tell me I cannot see my mom or my kids because that's my right. It is my family.
Mhm.
Nobody can take that away from me.
Yeah.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
She looked at me and she didn't say anything. I wasn't going to argue too far, but it's as simple as that. And I was telling that to my mom as well. Nobody can take away my right
Mhm.
to see my family or like in my kids, because it's, if we look at it, it's my mom, but I'm her child, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So it's like telling me I cannot see my kids. It's like, no, it's not going to happen. Forget it. They're my kids, right?
Yeah.
Which it will go to another conversation that we can have another day, because it goes with, and I don't know how much you know about uh, like the whole birth certificates and the IDs and all that stuff. I share that
Mhm.
with you as
Mhm.
well. And but I knew about it, but not so much. But that's gonna take it in a whole different route completely, right?
Yeah.
And but definitely, what are the things that you suggest people that do not have a clue about their rights? They don't have a clue of what to do and what not to do. What could be the baby step for them to start up? Because I think at this point, it is all about awakening. But we
Mhm.
cannot force anybody, and you know this, we
Yeah.
cannot force anybody to see the truth if they're not willing to see it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and but what can be the steps for these people to say, okay, I could consider this. Let's go and then start going on that route to see what
Yeah.
they can make their own mind at
Yeah.
the end of the day.
I'd say number one, and it's not even about the rights, it's a number one for everybody. Ask yourself, what's driving your beliefs?
Yeah.
What's driving your beliefs? Is it fear? Is anything that you're believing right now based on fear? Is it, whether it's something about COVID, is your belief based on fear?
Yeah.
If it's something about what the police may or may not do or how they may or may not interact with you, is it based on fear? If it's based on fear, change your beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
If it's based on fear, change your beliefs. Find awareness of where my beliefs
Mm-hmm.
are based. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, find awareness of where your beliefs are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you believe? And why do I believe that? Is it only because the news has told me this before? Is it only because the only thing I've ever heard about on this topic is from this source? Then number three, consider the source.
Mm-hmm.
What is the source of my belief on this topic? Is it the public media? Is it somebody who has my well-being in mind? Is it somebody who's looking out first and foremost for my best interest? And I'll tell you right now, if it's the public media, they do not. They have one thing that is first and foremost, and that is sales.
Yeah.
Okay. CBC, CTV, CNN, Fox,
Yeah.
Global,
Yeah.
friggin' Bell, Rogers. These are companies. These are businesses. If you think for one red second that they're gonna sacrifice money for the sake of delivering your well-being, if it becomes down to a choice, then you're dead wrong.
Yeah.
They are in business to be in business.
Yeah.
So consider your source.
Yes.
What is driving the messaging that I'm receiving? Where am I receiving this messaging?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do I believe that it's, it could be something as simple as, do I believe that it's a good thing to shovel my neighbor's walks?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do I believe that? Well, because my parents believed a certain way and they were religious and these are the teachings that they, espoused. And ultimately when I do shovel my neighbor's walks, I feel good inside. So you know what, that's probably an okay belief to harbor.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I afraid to have my family over for Christmas? Well, let's see. Why do I believe that? Well, because the news is saying so, and the news can't tell me often enough that the cops are out and the bylaw cops are out looking for people in violation, and that people are like calling the cops on their neighbors.
Yeah.
Well, what if I changed my belief, which was that, you know what, all my neighbors feel the same way I do. Mm-hmm. All my neighbors want to see their families. Yeah. And all my neighbors are sick of all this crap too. Yeah. And they're with me.
There's something key on what you're saying, which is, and I think a lot of us are. It is part of all of us as human beings is our instinct, our intuition, right? And unfortunately, most human beings are losing that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to childhood and in so many ways, right? Yeah. How people were raised and all that stuff. And but on the other side, I also see that more people are getting back in touch with that. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the number one thing. Because there is this lady that I also interviewed. She talks about safety. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that she always talks about is, if it doesn't feel right, do not proceed. Yeah. So it's like, but it means that we have to listen to what our body is telling us. Mm-hmm. And we're so disconnected that, even going back to those beliefs, right? We're so disconnected that we don't even take the time to think and say, where is that belief coming from? You're asking that. And I wonder how many people actually ask themselves that question. Yeah. Right? Where is that belief coming from? Mm-hmm. Right?
People aren't even aware of the beliefs that they have. They're not even aware of the ways they believe, contrary to the other possibilities. Yeah. Most people. Let's even go back to like the BLM stuff. That was going crazy in the spring. Okay. What do I believe about BLM? What do you believe about it? What do you believe about about that movement and about even about let's say some of the videos that have been posted online, okay, and some of the messaging out there. Let's consider, what's the messaging, what's the feeling around that messaging. Is it fear? Is it fear based? Is it hate based? The answers are yes. Where's that messaging coming from? What's the source of that messaging, and what's the motive behind that messaging? Usually it's from the news, not giving you the full information. Okay.
And it goes and even, and there's another thing about BLM is that it is all based in the US. And Americans, and I have told this to American people that I recently met, I said, you guys are racist naturally. That's not the nature of Canadians, right? Canadians have the tendency to be a little bit more open. They can be other things, but not necessarily racist will be the top, right? But Americans, they're racist. I experienced that myself, and I'm not even Black. Like I'm just, like brownish.
Well, and again, that's a pretty broad generalization, because there's like 350 million Americans.
Yes.
And you haven't met them all.
Totally. But here's what my experience, and it's funny because it goes with experience that I had, right? I lived in Florida, right? I was treated like Cuban. Right? Yeah. And people don't even treat you well because they think I'm Cuban. Basically, even my Spanish accent, it is similar to some Cubans, right? So I'm treated like Cuban. Then I moved to North Carolina. I'm treated like a Mexican. They don't even know where I come from. I don't even look Mexican, or only from the TV ones. The TV ones, they always joke about it, right? So
it depends who you ask.
Exactly. And so I don't even look Mexican. My Spanish accent is not even Mexican, right? And I was treated like very bad because I was put in a pile, right? And that's kind of how it is. That is naturally, like when you look at the history of the United States, they're pretty much like that. That's a very common behavior that you have seen through history. It's not Canadian, right? Canadians have a different behavior, and they're buying on a crap that doesn't belong to us here, right? So that's unacceptable. Right. So and don't get me wrong, even my brother is an actor, and he was telling me, like, he's darker than me, right? And he was saying that in university it is really hard for him because he had a darker skin. Like that industry, it is racist, but it's but now we have to kind of narrow it down. I'm not saying that Canadians are racist, right? Which we can be. Like, I think it's why, like, and I'm saying why not, right? Like we stereotype, but it's a stereotyping doesn't mean that we're racist, right? So then he's like, the industry is very racist.
That's right. I think racism implies hatred.
Yes.
There are stereotypes that people learn because they have no experience otherwise.
Of course.
That doesn't mean they necessarily hate that culture or person or color or whatever.
Totally. It's like back home. It is. I never went to school with a Chinese. Never. And the whole joke about it was the Chinese just live in their restaurants because you only see them in the Chinese restaurants. It's just a funny thing, but I cannot even explain that, right? And the joke is, you never see a Chinese funeral, so they probably eat, or we eat them, basically. No, I'm telling you, it is this whole thing, but it goes back to stereotyping. Do we hate Chinese? No, not really. It is just a whole stereotype about, it's like even here, right? What is the best stereotype about taxi driver? That they're from Pakistan, right? Like it's just a stereotype. Am I being racist for that? Oh, no, because I respect them. But it's what it's all about, and I think that's where people are getting confused as well, right? In all those things, how are they going, manipulated? I think that's how things is being manipulated. because again, it is a strategy that is well known. It's been used through history and it worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's proving again that it's still working today, that we still know that that strategy has been implemented through history in the past, right?
Yeah.
And it's all it's something that I definitely cannot comprehend
Yeah.
how some people are unable to see through that what is that called, a smoke gun, a smoking gun, something like that, when you
Yeah.
say that it's a
Yeah.
thing like you
The-
cannot see through.
Like through the fog, through the
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, so thank you very much for being here.
All
I
right.
always enjoy talking to you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
thank you, thank
Thanks,
you.
Carmen.
And everybody that has been watching this, please stay tuned. And there's so much more coming up. So remember, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook. I always put the links in the description. And I'm also going to add the link to the books that he mentioned today. And so then you can access it if you want to know more about it. And definitely, I will be happy to share links about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, so then you get to know some more about that as well, and many other links that I can definitely share with you, so then you know what are the things that that you need to know as a citizen of absolutely any country. This is a must. So thank you very much for watching and listening to this, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you.